All right. Hey everyone, welcome back. This video is season one of psychological frameworks, and today we have reached episode two, where I might be talking about a topic that you have heard quite often when it comes to the male loneliness epidemic, which is emotional intelligence. Now, I knew the term before it was popular, or like it became popular during the whole discussion of what do you wish for in a partner, and one of the top three answers was always, well, I'd like him to be emotional intelligent. The question is how many people actually know what that is? Because the term emotional intelligence, it's not from the pop culture as we know it, it's actually a scientific term. And in contrast to IQ, which is like intelligence as we know it, where we kind of count pattern recognition, maybe even being cultured as intelligent, which is, I think, a weird way to put intelligence and being educated on the same level, but that's a different discussion. But we have an instinctive, like, we have thoughts when someone says someone is intelligent, right? But I think for a lot of people, emotional intelligence is just abstract. And a lot of these discussions nowadays for male loneliness epidemic, you also see certain figures like Professor Scott Galloway, who talks about that boys in school, for instance, they're left behind because they don't understand or they're not taught emotional intelligence, while girls do. And here references one example, which I think might be important to mention, which is actually anecdote. So he was talking about eighth graders and he was reconstructing different situations with them. So he remembers quite clearly how he was interacting with with eighth graders, boys and girls, and found that girls were much more mature for the age. So they knew social customs, they knew how to greet adults, they knew how to behave themselves, while apparently boys couldn't. Now, emotional intelligence does explain maybe certain aspects of the whole discussion that we kind of heard about the male loneliness epidemic, but it does not explain everything because emotional intelligence, as you will see based on the factors, might be tied to cultures. So that is again to your environment. So I think even if you have read the OG book of emotional intelligence, that's in German, but the English version will say emotional intelligence by Daniel Goleman, you will know that he has a lot of examples, a lot of frameworks and key traits that he considers to be emotional intelligence or like emotional intelligent. And he makes the claim that emotional intelligence is way more important than your academic intelligence. And we'll try to understand within this video why exactly. So I have my notes and I did had to use ChatGPT actually in terms of like a dialogue because I've read this book 5 years ago when I was in grade nine. Like I remember the key ideas, but not everything. So just for transparency reason, I had to look up like summaries of the book. Anyways, we'll try to concentrate on the five key traits that make an individual emotionally intelligent. That's the fastest way to explain it, and might be the way to bring you most value, actually. So, the first important value that you need to develop in order to be emotionally intelligent is self-awareness. That is knowing yourself. Now, how do I know it myself? Journaling is not enough, actually, right? Because if you journal, you're just reflecting on your day. You're not necessarily doing a meta reflection. That is a reflection on your reflection. Because that is essentially what you need in order to understand how you work. Because if you write on a daily basis, which is great for your brain, it doesn't necessarily mean that you really understand what actions have triggered you. And that is the goal in developing self-awareness. So you need to understand what triggers certain reactions from your side. And if you can understand how your reactions trigger someone else. So that's self-awareness. But it also encompasses, your strength, your weaknesses, The basic stuff that essentially is being asked in an interview, in a job interview, or if you're going to meet new people. That's you presenting your self-awareness. I think that was pretty easy to understand. Second value, self-regulation. That's a hard one for I think our generation because you have so many digital touch points and they're so easily accessible that you might think, well, it's hard for me to cut out these distractions, which is a valid point. But again, self-regulation consists of you knowing how to regulate certain desires or certain habits. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it does account also for emotions. So some people, like if you remember the Labubu craze, which I really didn't understand, you had people really, like you saw, they were not able to manage their emotions in any way. They were upset when they did not get the model they wanted. They were overly happy when they did. And so the question for someone like us is, well, how come they cannot regulate their emotions? And the reason that might be happening is because they are so self-centered, they really don't need to interact with people. Because if you interact with people, one, you're not the main character of their life, you're the main character of your own life. Two, you cannot really assume that your emotions are worth more than theirs, right? Or even your thoughts are better than theirs. That's not how you build relationships. That's how you destroy them. And so that is the part of self-regulations, um, which is essentially limiting yourself, because that will come in handy if you start having relationships in any form, because you will run into arguments, and it's important for you to always limit yourself. Because if you limit yourself in terms of emotions, you'll be able to clearly state your issues. And that is way more constructive for every relationship that you might have than just crashing out. Just that's how it is. Third thing, motivation. So again, our time is limited on Earth. We should do the things that we want to do. Here's the thing. To do the things that you really want to do, the goals that you set yourself, you need motivation and discipline. That's where, for instance, self-regulation comes in. But motivation also encompasses internal drive and ambition. So ambition nowadays is romanticized. It's not that fun, right? Like everybody who has tried to do certain hard things, they know it's not that fun, but they have a vision and they know that if they don't do it today or tomorrow, they will lose the spark and they will lose the vision. They have a sense of urgency. So that's what motivation is. And please do not let yourself be fooled by the fact that it's going to be easy in any way if you start being ambitious for anything. It's not. But again, you can talk 10 minutes about that topic in another setting. We won't do that today. Fourth skill, social skills. So everything that we've been listing from self-awareness, self-regulation, sorry, and motivation, these three build upon the foundation that you can use to start having relationships. In terms of, business, it's always nice to be adaptable to situations. You need to always manage your thoughts and how you frame certain things and your emotions. Huge thing. You need to be able to regulate your emotions. Obviously, you're going to crash out at some point, but for most times, you should be able to regulate, at least in public settings, your emotions. So that's social skills. But I think Goleman also mentioned that for the social skills, there is a certain part of you influencing other people. Because again, we are social animals, so what we do does not only impact us, but other people. So if you start behaving rudely to someone, chances are, one, they won't talk to you. Two, you're impacting others negatively with your behavior. Some might look up to you and use you as a role model and then behave just as bad as you. So again, also come with terms that you have a responsibility upon others on how you act. Just a side note. The fifth and the last one, which is kind of discussed a lot in these male loneliness epidemic discussions, is empathy. empathy is not just trying to feel the other side in regards to conflict or any situation. It's also being able to understand the perspective. Now, understanding perspectives might be really hard. I mean, if you have a political stance, chances are you won't change the political stance if someone from the opposite side tries to argue with you. Um, Best example for that are those Jubilee discussions, which I really don't like because they're not really discussions, they're just slaughtering each other with aesthetically pleasing arguments with no facts. But essentially, it's that phenomenon. But here's the thing, empathy allows you to look into other worlds, into other viewpoints, which can be very enriching. But again, also reminds you of certain limits that you need to set for yourself, because even if you don't agree with what they're saying, you can't just crash out and tell them or her or whoever you're talking to that that's wrong, that doesn't work. If you come to terms with their perspective, you will figure out how they came to their conclusion. And then you might find a mistake or like an error or anything that is not really consistent with how their thoughts shaped a certain action or a certain thing they've said. And if you're able to pinpoint that, then you can kind of look more kindly upon the mistake they did. But that also goes the other way around, right? So maybe you did a mistake, they recognize that, and then can kind of de-escalate situations. So that's essentially the playbook of emotional intelligence. And it's not easy to do, right? So these are the five most important key traits. But again, remember, because we are, as a species, very flexible in terms of social interactions, there are many more skills that you'll learn once you've mastered these five, or once you have a strong foundation for it. Because these skills, they're not just important for the male loneliness epidemic discussion, they're important for your future success. I mean, I was able to work at certain organizations just because at the right time and during the right conversation, I was able to add certain things to the social interaction that, convinced them of working with me, right? And I mean, I did make a video about social capital and cultural capital. This also accounts for social interactions, but the most important thing is always try to understand the other side before you react too fast. And this is not just dating advice. Again, that is for you to take. Right. So I hope this video helped you in any way. Um, and I hope it also cleared why emotional intelligence, it's not that easy to throw the term around and be like, well, I'd like people to be emotionally more intelligent. You need to understand what that is in order to maybe help people understand how to use and how to develop it. And that's it. Thank you for your attention.